In the bustling city of London, two boys were born on the same day. But their lives couldn't be more different. One was Edward Tudor, the Prince of England. The other was Tom Canty, a poor boy from Offal Court. Edward's world was full of luxury and comfort. Tom's world was harsh and unforgiving. Despite their differences, both boys shared a curiosity about the world. Little did they know that fate would soon grant their wishes, and their lives would change forever. Tom Canty's life was far from easy. He lived in Offal Court, one of London's poorest areas. His home was a small, crumbling house. But Tom tried to make the best of it. He'd go out to beg for money or food. Tom had a kind heart. Despite his hardships, Tom loved to read. He dreamed of a world beyond Offal Court. Little did Tom know that his dreams were about to come true. One day, Tom's curiosity got the better of him. He wandered near the palace gates. As he peered through the bars, he saw a boy about his age. It was Prince Edward himself. Edward ordered the guards to let Tom in. For the first time, the prince and the pauper stood face to face. They were shocked by their resemblance. On a whim, Edward suggested they switch clothes. They never imagined this simple game would lead to such an adventure. With their clothes exchanged, Edward and Tom looked at each other in wonder. Edward felt strange in Tom's ragged clothes. Tom felt equally odd in Edward's fine garments. But the real shock came when they stepped out of the room. No one could tell them apart. Edward, dressed as Tom, was mistaken for a beggar boy. The guards roughly threw him out of the palace. He found himself alone on the streets of London. It was a world he had never seen before. He was scared, but also excited to explore. Tom, meanwhile, was trapped in the palace. Everyone thought he was Prince Edward. He tried to explain, but no one believed him. They thought the prince had gone mad. Tom was both thrilled and terrified. He had to pretend to be royalty or face dire consequences. As night fell, both boys realized the gravity of their situation. Edward was cold and hungry on the streets. Tom was lonely and scared in the grand palace. They both wished they could go back to their own lives, but fate had other plans for them. Edward's first night on the streets was a harsh awakening. He had never felt so cold or hungry. He tried to find his way back to the palace, but in his ragged clothes, no one believed he was the prince. People laughed at him or chased him away. As days passed, Edward learned to survive. He begged for food and slept in doorways. He met other poor children who showed him how to find shelter. Edward was shocked by the hardships they faced every day. He began to understand Tom's life. One day, Edward met a kind soldier named Miles Hendon. Miles didn't believe Edward was the prince, but he took pity on the boy and decided to help him. Miles became Edward's protector and friend. He taught Edward how to defend himself. Through his adventures, Edward's eyes were opened. He saw the poverty and injustice in his kingdom. He felt ashamed of how little he had known before. Edward vowed that if he ever returned to the throne, he would be a better, more compassionate ruler. Pause 3s. Back at the palace, Tom was facing his own set of problems. He was surrounded by luxury, but he felt like a prisoner. Everyone expected him to act like Prince Edward. But Tom didn't know how to be a prince. He made mistakes that confused the court. Tom tried to tell the truth, but no one believed him. They thought the prince had gone mad. The king was ill and growing worse. Tom was afraid of what would happen when the king died. He knew he wasn't the real prince, but he didn't know how to fix things. Despite his fears, Tom started to enjoy some aspects of royal life. He loved the food and the soft beds. He enjoyed learning about history and politics. Tom realized he had a talent for ruling. He made fair decisions that surprised the court. As time passed, Tom grew more confident, but he never forgot about Edward. He worried about the real prince out on the streets. Tom hoped Edward was safe. He knew he had to find a way to switch back before it was too late. While Tom struggled in the palace, Edward was having adventures on the streets. With Miles Hendon by his side, he travelled through London and beyond. They met all sorts of people, from thieves to kind peasants. Edward learned more about his kingdom than he ever had in the palace. One day, they stumbled upon a group of outlaws. The outlaws were planning to overthrow the king. Edward was shocked. He tried to stop them, revealing his true identity, but they just laughed and tied him up. Miles fought bravely to free Edward. Through these experiences, Edward and Miles formed a strong bond. Miles still didn't believe Edward was the prince, but he admired the boy's courage and kindness. Edward learned to value true friendship. He saw that nobility wasn't about birth, but about actions. As they travelled, Edward heard news from the palace. He learned that the king was dying, and Prince Edward was acting strangely. Edward knew he had to return to London. He had to reclaim his throne and save Tom from a fate he didn't deserve. The day of the coronation arrived. Tom was terrified. He knew he wasn't the real prince, but he didn't know how to stop the ceremony. As he walked into Westminster Abbey, he saw Edward in the crowd. Edward was trying to reach him, but guards held him back. Tom made a brave decision. He stopped the ceremony and told everyone the truth. He pointed to Edward and declared him the true prince. The court was in uproar. No one knew who to believe. It seemed like chaos would erupt at any moment. Edward stepped forward. He began to reveal secrets only the true prince would know. He described hidden rooms in the palace and private conversations with the king. Slowly, people began to believe him. The true prince had returned. In a final test, Edward revealed the location of the Great Seal of England. This proof convinced everyone. Edward was crowned as the rightful king. But he didn't forget Tom. He declared Tom his brother and gave him a place in the court. Justice was served, and both boys found their true places. The adventure changed both Edward and Tom forever. Edward became a wise and compassionate king. He never forgot the hardships he saw on the streets. He worked to improve the lives of the poor. He made Miles Hendon a knight and kept him as a close advisor. Tom didn't return to Offal Court. Edward gave him an education and a position at court. Tom used his experiences to help Edward understand the needs of the common people. Together, they made many positive changes in the kingdom. Tom's family was also cared for. Both boys learned valuable lessons. Edward learned empathy and the importance of understanding all his subjects. Tom learned that he had value and talents beyond his poor beginnings. They both realized that true worth comes from within, not from clothes or titles. The story of the prince and the pauper spread throughout the land. It became a symbol of compassion and understanding between all people, regardless of their birth. Edward and Tom's friendship lasted a lifetime. They never forgot the adventure that brought them together and changed their lives forever.